Good to see everyone's faces. We absolutely have a quorum here. I'm sure there are a few more that are on their way. We do have a few members who have let us know they won't be joining us or will be joining us by phone and so forth. But as we've started recording, we should go ahead and call this meeting to order. I want to welcome everybody to this space where we've been charged to take something that's uh, complex and bring coherence to create a community of listening where voices of our community are actually heard and will be seen within our recommendations when it all comes down to that point. Um, we have a similar format this evening as we did last time, where we will have a presentation. In that last meeting, our presentation was really geared toward not only bringing us the work of one of our community partners, but also helping us and reminding us of how this task force came to be. And in today's meeting, we will also have another presentation, which also has a double meaning, not just bringing a community partner organization's work to the front and to this task force, but also to think about ways that we could take many other elements of what we're going to look at and work with and take the very same framework that we'll see today and find ways that we could possibly take that framework or similar framework into our work going forward. So again, it's going to be a treat. We have a lot of time for question and answer, and I'm ready to get started. I want to, along with my co-host, Marcia, Owen, want to have give you a few introductions of some persons who are joining us here on the panelist side. I'd like to introduce Dr. Dwayne Campbell. He's a recipient of a Fuse Executive Fellowship. He resides here in Durham, so once he got that fellowship, he didn't have to go far to fulfill it. And we're happy that he's a part of our community already, particularly in doing this work. He has a background in research and evaluation. He's interested in the safety and wellness in this community as a well-coordinated process with a wide cross-section of stakeholders. His job is housed within the city offices, but his sole task through the fellowship is the work of this committee. So I'd like to introduce Dwayne Campbell to you and give him a chance to say a few words.
Thank you, Xavier, and it is my pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. Some of you I've worked with in a different space and in a different capacity. My name is Dwayne Campbell, as Xavier had introduced me. I hope you heard my accent because that represents my homeland, Jamaica. I live here in Durham with my wife, and we are now expecting our first child any minute now. I am happy that I'm going to be supporting the task force and the task force work. I watched your first meeting. I was very much impressed with everything that was discussed. I was happy to see the passion with which each of you discussed the very important issues that are critical to us improving where we live. So with me joining Durham and the city of Durham and the work of the task force, I hope I can use my own expertise and experience to support your vision and to make Durham an even more exciting place to live, so that Durham can become a safe space economically, socially, financially for everybody, especially those who have traditionally been disenfranchised. So thank you for allowing me to join your space. And please feel free to let me know how I can be out there to support to the task force. Thank you, Xavier, and I'm turning it back over to you.
Great, and I have, hi everyone, good to see you. Good to be back together. Glad to have you in the house. Muffin? I have the pleasure of introducing Ajane, who I call AJ, and I think you can too, Clemens, who will soon be Dr. Clemens. She is a PhD, just finishing up her PhD in Sanford School of Public Policy at Duke, and has done her primary, you don't get to meet somebody like this every day, who is doing her primary research on Durham's Durham residents' attitudes towards law enforcement in Durham and also in London. So comparing those in democracies. So we're just, how perfect is that? And we hope to hear about that more later in our time together through these next 18 months. And she has also spent lots of time advising lawmakers on state and federal levels. But I think the most exciting, not only is her dissertation just incredibly relevant, she also has spent enormous amounts of work in Denver, her hometown, where she was the community relations ombudsman, and she participated in over 150 meetings throughout the city and county of Denver and built and managed one of the nation's largest community police mediation programs. She is about to leave us in the fall to begin a professorship at the University of Denver, where she'll teach courses on American policy, politics, and structural inequality. She has been so generous to us and has helped me especially understand the dimensions of this work that we're doing. And I just want you to know, AJ, that your generosity and your brilliance, no matter how far you go, as far as the Mile High City, our respect and gratitude will be there. So glad to have you with us to help us understand sequential intercept mapping and more. That, hand it back to my buddy Xavier.
Did you have a few words, AJ?
Oh, just what a tremendous honor and privilege it is to serve you all, and thank you so much to co-chairs Owen and Cason for just inviting me into this space. And I'm excited and honored to continue to be of support in any way that I can. So University of Denver is very excited, for this. And so have promised to let me support you as much as you need or want. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So next on our agenda is our moment of silence. As a lifelong conductor, some of my favorite moments was in the midst of the full band, just rolling and pushing all that wonderful music out, taking my baton and just having a rest, and a pause in the music, and the power in that pause and the anticipation. And so that's what moments of silence are to me, a place for us to collectively think about, anticipate about what could actually happen when this work is done. So if you would join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Back to you, Marcia.
Last time we met, Manju shared a beautiful part of a poem from the great American poet Gwendolyn Brooks that I'd like to share with you. It just really speaks to what we're doing here. Gwendolyn Brooks writes, "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. May we be bound to each other as we share the value that we each bring to this gathering tonight." And I will begin. I trust there is in the chat a list, maybe not. So just feel free to, I'll just call on the next person. So we make sure we go through this. So I'll look at my screen. But the value that I bring to this gathering tonight is respect. And I will pass it to Samuel.
Thank you. I'm thankful to be here today with all the brilliant people here. And the value I'm bringing to this space is compassion. I think it's something that the world is lacking, but needs a lot of. And I think I'll pass it on to, is it Alec or is it Alex?
Thanks, Samuel. It's Alec with a C. Appreciate it. Hey, y'all. I think the value that I would like to bring tonight is humility. There's a lot that I have to learn that I don't know, but I'm excited to learn about. I'll pass it to Muffin.
Good evening, everyone. What I would like to bring, I guess, would be radical love, because we need to love hard and love in different ways. So yeah, and I will pass it to Dr. Carroll.
Hi, everyone. You can call me Jennifer. It's hard to pick just one because I feel like there's so many inspirational things happening in this group, but I would go with learning. I'm hoping to do a lot of that, and I think especially our guests will facilitate that a huge deal. And I will pass it to Tonya.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to bring hope into this space, and I will pass to Manju.
Thanks, Jatoia. My name is Manju, and I'm bringing enthusiasm. And I'll pass it to Mike.
Collaboration, and I'll pass it to Jesse.
Y'all don't call me Pound Cake.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stick you with a new nickname.
Y'all don't, not everybody knows me like that, and no one is calling me Pound Cake. Okay, but yes. Good evening, everyone. My word for today, the value I'm sharing is gentleness. And I will pass it to my girl, Shanise. Share safely. You in the car, so.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. The value that I'm bringing to this space today is support. And I will pass it to Tyler.
You said Tyler? Oh, okay. Appreciate being here with everybody in the past, Shanise, Tyler Whittenberg, he, him. The value I'm bringing is resilience. And I will pass to Nima Sheena.
We're going to go with a long I on that one. Instead, it's Naima Sheena. But what I'm going to bring, what value I want to bring to this space on this very cold day, it might sound random, but a little bit of warmth and comfort. That's what I'm bringing. I got to pass it. Hold on. Xavier, have you gone?
I have not.
Okay, I'm going to pass it to Xavier Cason.
All right. The value I'm bringing is belonging on both sides. I feel like I belong, and I feel like you belong. And I'm passing it over to Isaac.
Hi, y'all. Good to see you all. The value I'm bringing this evening is curiosity. And I'm actually not sure. I'm on my phone here, so I can't really see who else is on the call.
Mayor Pro Tem, will you share?
Absolutely. Hey, y'all. Happy to be here tonight. The value I would like to bring is imagination. And I will, have we done all the task force members? Should I throw it to Javier?
Yes.
Did Tonya go? I don't know if Tonya went.
Yeah, where is she?
Tonya. Oh, I see.
She's
Yeah, Tanya's here.
Okay. I did not go. Thank you for remembering me, Betsy. Appreciate it. I'm on the phone. In my car as well. I would appreciate the warmth from my sister, but I am going with a listening ear today is the value I'll bring. And I will pass it back to Javier.
Hey everyone, Javier. Listening as the value, and I think maybe Gudrun.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gudrun Farmer, I'm bringing anticipation to the table today.
Great. And who has not shared? Amber, I know you're there somewhere, right?
Hey y'all, I am here trying to get the Zoom and the YouTube together, but so I'm bringing the organization to the meeting today.
The glue. That's great. That's beautiful. Thank you. I think that's everyone, right? Okay. Do we all agree that these are the values that we will share and hold between us this evening? You can just thumbs up it. That's good. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's a gift to be with y'all. Now, I would like to introduce the first business order of business on our agenda today, which is the review of the bylaws. We are tasked with following, we have requirements, and they are contained in those bylaws. I hope everybody's had a chance to read them. But just in case, we're just going to go over a few. I'll go over the first three, and then Xavier can finish us up. But I think the most important parts of the bylaws is that we are required to review all the existing resources. And I think tonight, as we do this sequential intercept mapping, we'll really see the value of that and how that will be very, very relevant and how we can apply that. So we need to review the existing resources to identify the gaps in order to make recommendations so that we can fulfill this mission. And we'll talk more about that in next steps as well. The next thing that we must do is have 3 listening sessions in the first 3 months of our existence. We've had 1, we'll have 1 tonight. And so our next meeting, I look forward to another listening session to be announced. And then also we are tasked with educating once we understand the resources and have recommendations that we share those fully with the public so that they too understand what is available. And we also must provide quarterly reports, and that's to the commissioners, to the city, to the school board, and to the community. And I hope that will be the great work of Dr. Campbell. And so those are just 3 things for us to know that we must address. And with that, I will turn it to you, Xavier.
Well, 2 more points we wanted to really look at coming from the bylaws. We've been charged with making specific recommendations to our city council, our county commissioners, our board of education. Those areas are related to 5 main points. 1, school resource officers. Of course, these are the sheriffs that are mainly in our high schools and our middle schools. To make recommendations concerning the existing Durham County drug courts. And I would imagine that we would look at criminal justice on a larger scale through that roundtable. The third part would be an expanded violence interrupter program. You may be familiar with Bull City United and the contract that they have with the city and working within the county. The fourth area is making recommendations regarding a new community, nonviolence, mental health, first aid, and de-escalation training program. And the fifth area would be looking at a new way that crisis response can be handled. In addition to having 911 or in conjunction with 911, however this ends up looking, that we'd allow for certain calls to be handled by other trained professionals, such as social workers and trained counselors, psychiatric nurses, and so forth. So that was the fourth point. We wanted to make sure that we talked about those 5 with the understanding that there could be many more that come out, many more roundtables outside of those 5 areas that would either inform those 5 areas or stand alone as a new item that we want to make a recommendation on. We also want to make sure, and it's stated and listed out in the bylaws, that we do have also a community resource panel. Persons from the sheriff's office, the police chief's office, someone from the Criminal Justice Resource Center, Durham Public Schools, Public Health, Alliance Behavioral Health, Crisis Response Center or Family Justice Center Director, Juvenile Prevention Council Administrator, the EMS, District Attorney for Durham, and Social Services. So all those are listed in our bylaws, and we will be hearing from those experts as well. Just want to remind you, in case you didn't know, that we also have a lot of others, experts in the community, from our research partners, our universities, and many other who have been waiting to talk to us and want to get a word in. I do want you to know that, and Marcia will talk about it a little more later, that we are really going to work on a plan to make sure that we get to hear from all these people. Some of them will be in our Wednesday task force meetings. Some of them will be in the roundtables, but we're going to create a culture of listening. So those are the highlights of the bylaws. I know you've had a chance to look at them. Take a look again. If there's some other areas that you think we should talk about in future meetings, please let us know. We want to move right on to our presentation today. I want to bring to you Ms. Gudrun Palmer from the Criminal Justice Resource Center. And she'll be talking about sequential intercept mapping. And just again, as a framework, as I said earlier, when we did the welcome, I was excited because I'm like, this is something that they really took us through a day in the life of someone who has a mental health crisis, and how the systems, how that person can possibly work through all the systems in our community as they try to get their way through the crisis situation. And we could easily, I think, place other persons, other of our fellow citizens in those same areas. So I'd ask Gudrun to come on up and introduce herself and her role and the framework that she'd like to bring for us. Please welcome Gudrun Palmer.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Gudrun Palmer. I work at the Durham County Criminal Justice Resource Center. And the Criminal Justice Resource Center is a department within Durham County government. We are part of the public safety portfolio, but we actually provide human services. The Criminal Justice Resource Center does a lot of substance use treatment, mental health services, and our agency, we primarily serve adults in the criminal justice system, but we work with them from the very beginning, from first contact, all the way to people coming out of incarceration after very long periods of incarceration. So I know that Amber sent you the link to this sequential intercept map that has come up several times already, has been mentioned. And I think I suggested also that you get a hard copy because it's really hard to see on a screen. I'm not sure whether, can I share screen so I can move a little bit, or should we just talk a little bit? So what I'm trying to do today is tell you a little bit about what we have done with our Stepping Up initiative using this map. I'm not trying to tell you about how you should do your work. I will not try to tell you how the Criminal Justice Resource Center is all over this map and all. I'm not talking about any of this right today. I'm really just trying to show you how we looked at the community in front of us and try to understand what is happening and then identify opportunities for improvement. Because, we look at, nothing is ever static. Everything changes all the time. But we were trying to, and the map that you received, that we populated, we did not create this. This is something that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration created in the Gaines Center, but we populated that for Durham. And so we did this to help us understand what happens in our community and how someone can move through this system. How someone moves through the system from Intercept 0 all the way to Intercept 5. So the sequential intercept, we mapped this several times. We did it initially on our own, and it was a very rudimentary kind of little boxes in this. And then several years later, as we continued to look at this map and continue to have this conversation, we actually had a trained facilitator to work with us in a 2-day workshop to continuously identify what is happening and where the pieces are. So we developed a comprehensive picture of how people with mental illness and co-occurring disorders are flowing through our Durham County criminal justice system. This is a very specific. This map is for individuals with mental illness in the criminal justice system. And the purpose of our exercise was, how can we reduce the number of people in our jail that are presenting with mental illness? So, as you are working through your charges or your challenges in your bylaws, yours are different. But I am trying to kind of show you how we did this in a way that could potentially also help you dissect your own systems and dissect what the systems that you will be looking at.
And Gudrun, excuse me, would you like me to share my screen with that? I know you want us to you want to walk us through the visual.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Did you have yours up where you could share? Because if not, I can.
Gudrun, you should be able to share yours if you want to.
I think if Xavier shares it, then I can focus on just talking. Sorry.
And I'll do my best to navigate.
Okay. All right. Are you all seeing the whole map or just portions of it?
I've got it kind of lower. How would you like to start?
So, yeah, maybe look at the whole piece first as you have it right now.
Okay.
So what you have here is intercept 0 through 5. Intercept 0 is where, let me start back. We started initially with intercept 1 through 5. Intercept 1, it was community law enforcement. But over the years, because this is a national effort and a national model, we realized everyone realized, the field realized that intercept 1 was too large, and there is actually something way before someone has contact with law enforcement, right? And that's the community. And so the intercept 0 identifies everything that is on a community level: hospitals, crisis, respite, peer, community services. And so what we then did is identify all the services that are happening in this space. Intercept 1 is law enforcement and emergency services. So this is like someone moves into it, calls 911 dispatch, and then the different contexts they may have: mobile crisis, community paramedics, law enforcement. And from there, you move into the intercept 2. remember, it's meant people with mental illness in the criminal justice system. So from law enforcement emergency services, you move into, because that's what the system we're looking at is detention, and then your first 24 hours in the detention, basically. The next is if you stay in jail, what happens if you stay in the system, then we're looking at the courts and we're looking at the jail. Then Intercept 4 focuses on re-entry. This is when someone comes out of the detention center. And Intercept 5 is, again, the services in the community and community supports. And then we looked at the connections. So when you look at your Intercept 0, you see a tremendous list of services. These are the services that we kind of listed. And what we did is, not only did we, in our work in the Stepping Up initiative, not only did we look at what services are in the community, but we also talked at length at what do we not have enough of? What do we have, but we don't have enough of it? And then we also talked about gaps. So we looked at our resources, we looked at gaps, and we talked about opportunities in each of these intercepts to change the trajectory, to change the line. So, so when you look at how people move from Intercept 0 into Intercept 1, especially up here, right? If people contact law 911 dispatch and 911 dispatch, because this is, I think it's definitely one of your challenges, right? One of your opportunities, then law enforcement gets involved. And so we looked at CIT. And so there is a CIT and CIT trained, and we looked at how many people are CIT trained and where is the CIT training, different organizations. And so law enforcement then has the option of taking someone to detox, take someone to the hospital, take someone to the recovery response center, or arrest. Right, and then and then the magistrates have an opportunity to make a determination whether someone could post bond or is released on their own recognizance. And so we mapped every step. We mapped what is available, and then we also talked about what could be done better. In the detention center, there are a number of programs and services to for one, identify individuals that have a mental illness. Remember, that's our focus, right? There is a screen, and then people that are flagged on the screen then receive a full evaluation by the jail mental health team, and then there are a number of other organizations that can have an impact. And so pre-trial detention, pre-trial screening, and then there is the first appearance. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the criminal justice system, so you know there is a bond review and public defender is appointed. And so some people are released, some people stay in the detention center. And if they stay in a detention center, there are some mental health services. There is a mental health court now. And the detention center in the Durham County Commissioners funded a mental health pod, a specialized pod inside the detention center. Detention officers are receiving CIT training now specific to detention. And then we moved into Intercept 4 with the reentry and the services that are available or that need to be available to people that come out of the detention center. housing and all the wraparound services, especially mental health services. And then if someone is under some kind of supervision after they get released, then we looked at the especially probation, parole, or any others. But so this is the map, and it's a really quick, but the main point why Marcia and Xavier thought I should bring this map to you is to kind of to tell you how we use this map to, for one, identify the gaps, identify opportunities, but then also identify what could be better, and develop priorities for activities or programming that could improve your system or your service levels in the community. So the map for us, our Stepping Up initiative, it helped us develop a comprehensive system, a picture of the system. It helped us to plot the resources and the gaps across the map, and it's a dynamic process, because things change all the time. You've been in Durham a while, you know that if we have services today, next year an organization may not be there anymore, or we may have a new service. So things change all the time. That's a great thing, but sometimes it's difficult to keep up with everything that we have. And then, of course, we also, especially in the mental health area, a lot of the funding comes from state and federal agencies. So a lot of that changes continuously. But this is an opportunity to look at what we have locally, not take something that's a national or that could be, but what we have here in Durham, and then for us, we also try to identify opportunities to divert, because the purpose of the Stepping Up initiative is so we reduce the number of people in the jail with who have mental illness. So obviously, when you look at the map, we need to focus on everything before Intercept 2, where someone goes to jail, right? So we need to focus on Intercept 0, and we need to focus on Intercept 1. So where are our opportunities? Where are our gaps? And so where do we not have enough? Where do we need to do better? And what do we not have at all? And so as you're looking at this, I'm hoping you can map your connections through the system, and then set your priorities, and potentially bring recommendations for improvement.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
One more, just for an example for diversion. So instead of, if you look at Intercept 0, instead of someone calling law enforcement, can they call somebody else, right? Instead of going to jail, if in Intercept 1, if law enforcement is involved, instead of going to jail, can they take them someplace else? So those are the opportunities to change the trajectory of going through that system. So hopefully, the more we can do, the more people stay in 0, right? Stay in the community and never enter into these other points. So that was, I know this is really fast, and I was probably a little bit too much over the map for you to follow along, but that's why I asked that you have the map, the actual map in front of you. And this is really just an example of how we mapped our system. This is just so, for me, I'm a person, I need to see things in front of me, right? I cannot just hear, I need to look at it. So we continuously looked at this map and to see what do we have, what do we need more of. And we did identify some opportunities and some small steps. For example, in one of our conversations, the detention staff was bringing up that people that were inebriated, drunk, would be taken to the jail on a 24-hour hold. safekeeping, basically, because law enforcement was concerned about them. But the jail is not a good place for them, right? They should be going to a shelter or a recovery center or so. And so we identified the Recovery Response Center said we will work with law enforcement and did a lot of training and continuous training and actually reduced the number of people that were taken to jail month by month. We could see the number dropping. Excuse me. And now I stopped talking.
I appreciate you bringing this framework. Again, it's just an example of some work that's already been done, but also a way we can look at how we do our work. And I want to ask Ajane to kind of step in and guide our question and answer.
Thank you, Xavier. And again, Marcia, for allowing me to take part in this process. And thank you for that presentation, Gudrun. All right, so I guess for my first question, I'd like to take about 90 seconds or so to try to summarize what I think I understood from your presentation. I also may or may not have read your report a couple of times beforehand, but please let me know after I do this little summary if there's anything that I got wrong or that I missed that you'd like to add. So there is a group of stakeholders who define the problem as there are too many people with mental illness and co-occurring substance abuse disorders who end up in jail unnecessarily. The stakeholders group was a coalition of the willing, about 26 people from 20 organizations and agencies who came together to figure out how to prevent this specific group from either entering the criminal justice system in the first place or being diverted from jail as soon as possible. The 26 stakeholders came from mental health, substance abuse, human services, corrections, law enforcement, courts. They were advocates, family members, and the consumers or the people themselves who were entering into these systems. And just for anyone just joining the group, it's called the Durham County Stepping Up Initiative Committee, which is part of a national effort hosted by CJRC, the Criminal Justice Resource Center. So you had this workshop to begin the work. And the goal, as I understand it, was to step back and take a look at the whole picture of Durham's systems from the perspective of a person with a serious mental illness and co-occurring substance abuse disorder who is in need of service. And so you wanted to see how everything was connected, capture it on a map so that everyone working would have one tool from which to work, where they could locate Durham's current resources and the barriers people face. And then by seeing how the systems connect to each other or fail to connect, then your team was able to pinpoint some of those gaps. Then by seeing the barriers people faced and when they needed help, and the gaps that existed between the systems, you were able to create a list of priorities that needed to be changed. And so as a group, you wrote down all your priorities, which looks kind of like a list of a to-do list of action items. You got everybody to vote for their top 3 choices. You counted up the votes and then took the top 4 to begin. And so these became kind of 4 working groups, if you will, at least to start. And you were looking at sort of community education, access to housing, addressing the length of stay in detention, funding for mental health court. So within these working groups, everybody split up and or divvied up the action items. You wrote down who was doing what by when, and then recorded the status at subsequent meetings. And so since this workshop in February of 2019, the working groups have had several victories, like people getting grants, systems being changed, added. So some of those gaps that you had identified a couple of years ago have begun to be filled in over time. But changing one part of the system might have affected another part. Or there might be new things that you noticed as the working groups learned more and shared information. So your original map has had to be updated to keep up with what you have laid out as a dynamic process. Is there anything that I got wrong about that or that you'd like to explain further?
So we have been at this since 2015. So I'm sorry you all only have 18 months. We had a lot more time to work on this. And some of the victories that AJ mentioned came before this workshop that created the fancier map with all the lines and the charts and all this. We identified 4 priorities, but then COVID happened and we kind of lost momentum. So, so we are not quite as far along in our new priorities that we had identified as we wanted to. So we are now, just like you all, we getting together on a more regular basis again, and trying to reinvigorate our partners, bring our partner organizations back to the table to then start tackling again. Because COVID took a lot of attention from everybody for everything. So getting people to be interested in mental illness and advocating for people who are marginalized or often not just overlooked is hard. So we are now back at it again. So that's the one thing I wanted to mention in that. But
Thank
great,
you.
Great summary.
Thank you. My value that I'm bringing is grace, because Lord knows I need it. So thank you so much. All right. Well, I appreciate that that clarification. So just one more clarification. And Manju, yes, we'll make sure to send out that report to everybody. Okay. So in the committee's report, systems mapping and action planning, which is a lot more riveting than it sounds, you note something very important. You say that the working groups weren't examining individual pieces of the system, such as specific treatment, services, criminal justice practices, for example. In other words, you didn't take on the additional tasks of evaluating the quality or the effectiveness of individual parts of the systems. Rather, you were stepping back to make sure you identified everything Durham currently offers or imposes, frankly, and how it fits together or doesn't when you place yourself in the shoes of the person experiencing it. So this group does, however, offer some suggestions or food for thought for those who are interested in evaluating individual treatments, services, or practices. And so here are just a few examples the report highlights. It notes cultural competence and making sure providers aren't using cookie cutter approaches, but instead understanding people's needs. You urge providers and agencies to consider trauma. They may cause someone during interactions and or the trauma someone might have endured already, and be sensitive to that. The report talks about knowing and adjusting for gender differences, ongoing medication needs after these acute events, and easing transitions. In other words, providers shouldn't be thinking only about their own role, but helping people transition to the next process. Is there anything you'd like to add or change about that summary?
The summary is great. Your summary is absolutely. Those are the field evolves all the time in everything that we do, right? We always learn, we continue to learn, or we hope, or we should be continuing to learn and know that we can always do things better. And so, being trauma informed, having the capacity to develop gender specific programming, all these things we continuously have to evolve, and we can always do better. It's not about, to me, our intent was never to evaluate an individual program. That was not the intent, but it's the question is, what can we do better? We can always do better. And so there's always room for improvement, and there is a lot of research out there that we can use, but then we can also, we learn as we do. So there's always better and newer things available.
Okay, great. So now this task force does have the authority and indeed the mandate even to evaluate or sort of examine individual components. If that's something, knowing what you know now, if that's something that you could have done then, do you think the order matters? Do you think there's some value in just getting the map first and then, you know, selecting some individual components to look at, or do you think it makes sense to do any of those simultaneously?
I would always do the map first, but that's me. Okay. I would always do the map first because I think that I need to understand the larger picture and where everybody fits in. If you don't have the length, the time to do all this, and the luxury of time, especially to map your system, I guess you can build a plane and fly it at the same time. But I personally would first take a look and take a step back and look and see what is it and who interacts with who, and how do, you know, you look at the school system. And but not only do you need to look forward, you also need to look back, right? If there is a situation at a school, then what happens to a kid that gets involved with the school resource officer? But also look back and what did this kid bring to the school with them? You know, the community part, what might have happened at home? Because as we work through this intercept, we realize intercept 0 is the most important one, the community part. What can we do as early as possible to change the path? And you can do, and the earlier you can identify a situation or a problem, hopefully the better and the more gentle way to solve something for someone.
That's great. So I'll end on this final question because that's a perfect segue, and then toss it back to the co-chairs. You mentioned school resource officers. That, you know, is exactly actually what I was thinking of, because the task force's charter mandates that it evaluates and makes recommendations regarding, as Xavier mentioned earlier, school resource officers, drug court, violence interruption, mental health, first aid and de-escalation, and on-call crisis response with qualified professionals. So hypothetically speaking, if the task force formed working groups along these lines and one or all decided to use this tool, let's take the school resource officers, for example, you know, how would you recommend they get started?
So I think you need to be careful that you don't get too stuck in exactly this model, because this model—
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Don't get stuck on exactly this model that you have in front of you, because that was designed with a very specific purpose, right? The criminal justice system. So you cannot just say, oh, now we just changed the words. But think about, I'm not an expert on schools and how law enforcement interacts and who does what where in the school. But I think you can, those of you that understand those systems, then dissect the systems and see where are opportunities to change that line or cut the line, and who is interacting with whom, and who are the players in each area. It might be the same ones several times, but you can look at each one. You might have one that has only 3 or 4 column intercept areas, right? But so each model or each map probably will look different. None of them should all look the same, because then you're just copying somebody else's. But I think you take a really hard look at what each system is when you have your work groups. That's where you look and see who all are the players in these work groups, and then you need to kind of organize them, and then you map them. That's how I would do it. But as you can tell, with me, I'm using my hands. I'm a very visual person. Like maybe I should play Legos, right? Because that's how I would build my map. That's how practical I would be.
And so just to clarify, sorry, and then I'll be done. So when you starting, if you use the tool, I understand you're not like selling the tool, but if one were to use the tool, would you start with maybe some scenarios, and then, I mean, do you work backward? And how far back would you go? Like, when do you stop going backward?
No, you just take a scenario and you build the scenario out, and then you move backwards. And you go back as far as you can go, because the further back you go, the closer you are to the beginnings, right? And so you need to, and you may add something later. You just map it the best you understand it, and you ask questions, and then realize something, there might be another entity, another organization that comes even sooner, early childhood, all these things. So that's how I would do it. And don't feel like, you have to get it right the first time, because it's an evolving, it's a moving system. And the more you know, the bigger you will build it out, because you all, I think you will hear a lot, you will read a lot, you will learn a lot. And so you might have a map that initially has 5 boxes, and by the time you're done with your learning process, you will have 35.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you all.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking those clarifying guided questions for us.
Tough questions too.
If any of the task force members also have some questions you might want to ask based on what you saw.
I've got a kind of an overarching one. I guess now at the end, I'm understanding better the purpose of this really engaging presentation, to give us a sense of how we could use this mapping approach to the other things we're tackling. But I'm also intrigued by the specifics of what you're engaged in. So I guess the big question is, Gudrun, do you, and Marcia and Xavier, do you foresee a role for the task force in working alongside the Criminal Justice Resource Center in continuing to look at this specific process to help you address the issues of gaps and help amplify your recommendations for where the gaps need to be filled with the specific population of people with substance abuse and mental illness?
Absolutely. I think some of the things that you are tasked with to look at, I think you fit right in with our task group, with our Stepping Up Initiative Committee. And I think some of our members have a lot of insight and a lot of information. So we'd be happy to share more information with you. But as you're looking at, are you looking at CIT or law enforcement? If you look at our map, there is a huge opportunity if law enforcement does not take someone to jail, but either if someone else responds rather than law enforcement, or if law enforcement responds and then that person goes to a facility or goes to a treatment center rather than a detention center. So absolutely, great question, Mike. I'm with you. I'm your next cheerleader.
Because if that was the case, then yeah, I think we would all benefit from more presentations about the gaps you're talking about and what needs to be built up.
We'll definitely follow up on that as well. Thanks for that, Mike. Jesse has his hands up.
Yeah, just a quick question, and either soon to be Dr. AJ or Gudrun can answer it. You'd mentioned that pre-COVID, with all your research, there were 4 working groups. Can you name them again? They may not, in my mind, I'm assuming that they're still relevant, that the pandemic just exacerbated these issues. So I just want to make sure that we're hearing what you had identified as the 4 working groups or the 4 sort of focuses.
So Jesse, we did not have 4 working groups yet. We had identified 4 priorities and identified some individuals who were volunteering or being voluntold to work on some of those. They would have morphed into working groups because, to me, working groups, you kind of are accountable to each other, and you come back and you say what you did or didn't do.
Sure.
But are you just looking for the 4 areas?
Name those priorities for us again.
Okay, hold on 1 second. One was community education. Community education and mostly making residents aware of available mental health services. That was the first one. Access to housing, increased
Right.
access and availability for people, especially, someone coming out and needing shelter.
Sure.
So one was shelter access, and then also existing housing initiatives. Then the third one was looking at the length of stay, because we have, as we are looking at data, we have found that people with mental illness tend to stay longer in the detention center than people without mental illness. And the fourth one was additional services for gap in services for people in the mental health court.
Got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, AJ. You were cool. Like, you had the team on your back. You were clearly prepared. We appreciate your leadership, sis.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, I'm gonna teach you. I'll wait.
I had
Jennifer
a
has a
quick
hand.
question. Yeah, thank you. I also want to echo my thanks to the people who have given their time. I am aware of how long it takes to put something like this together. I want to acknowledge that and thank everyone for the insight and intellect they brought to the conversation. I also hope to keep this conversation going, because there's more things than we can talk about this month, this season in this document. It was made clear, and I appreciate, AJ, your like sort of insightful zeroing in on this, that the goal of this was a broad map of what's available, not a quality improvement or evaluation scheme, and that's perfectly fine. They're very different activities. I'm curious to know if, in doing this, and insofar as I'm asking you to guess, I would say please guess, because that would be helpful for us. Is there data available or evaluation activities happening so that we could do those things, right? So like, I'm looking at things like CIT programs, right? Which we have mountains of evidence telling us that individual officers benefit a great deal from them, but they don't necessarily have impacts in the field, or the drug court, where we have actually a lot of restrictions on who's allowed to be there, right? And the people who might actually be most helped by an alternative program like that are disqualified by some of their things. And so if we are to look at not just what are these paths available, but who is flowing through them, at what rate, why not, things like that. Do we have that kind of information available to us, or do we need to build up some informational infrastructure so that we can see not just the map, but how people are moving through the map, which people, how many, and so on?
Oh, that's a hard question. So
I know, I'm sorry. I acknowledge that that's a really big question.
So I would say, just looking at the map, most everything that you have that is listed here, there is data behind it. But it's not, it's different agencies. And so we do not have that in this box, law enforcement, there were that many numbers, right? And then from there, that many ended up with an arrest at the magistrate. And from there, that many ended in detention. Because again, remember, we were only looking at people with mental illness. And more the system, I can tell you how many people we have in the detention center that are identified as needing mental health services. I can tell you how many people we have that receive a pretrial screening and an assessment. But I think what you're looking for is starting over here and then walking all the way over to the right. We don't have that. Sorry.
I mean, that's what I expected. I just wanted to confirm. And so I just want to clarify then that means that likely through no fault of anyone's on this call, this is how our system currently is. If there are disparities or hiccups in the people flowing through this system as we would like them, ostensibly away from criminal justice service, things like that, we're not currently in a position to see that happening, except with our intuition.
And yeah, and for us, it's the providers that are saying, I cannot find a bed for my person, or I cannot connect a person who needs that level of mental health services to a service because there is no funding.
I appreciate your insight very much. Thank you.
And I really appreciate that question, because it makes me think about, you know, if we looked at that map as roads that lead you to a service provider or a criminal justice intercept. But what you're talking about, Jennifer, is widening that map and actually looking at the doors, because I'm sure there's some roads I could go down that I'm not welcome in, or there's some doors I could knock on or can't get through some gates. I mean, I don't have those keys. So what you're really talking about is barriers. And so going even deeper and talking about, okay, we've identified this road that takes us to this service. Now, who's done some research already that talks about where the barriers are to this? I mean, I think about my area of interest, homeless education. There are some federal agencies that say you're homeless if you are doubling up with a relative. And there's some agencies that say, no, you're not. You're good. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you are. And so there's absolutely a place to talk about barriers. So I think that's what you're really talking about here, is as we're mapping out intercepts and places that people in crisis end up, we also have to find out, do they even have a key to get in that door? I love it. We're going to keep that lifted. Isaac had his hand up earlier.
Sorry, I made a mistake with my technology here. I'm okay. Thank you.
We've all done that. Anyone else with a question? Don't want to leave any out. Okay, if not, we want to thank Gudrun again and Ajane for her wonderful guided questions, her journalistic skills. And we want to move on to our next agenda item. Marcia, I believe that's you.
Thank you. I want to just join with that gratitude. That's great. I just find this mapping so helpful, because by looking at it in a holistic way, Gudrun was teaching me how if you change one thing, it changes the system. And that's what we're doing here. So I can see this being applied to people who've been harmed, survivors. I can see students. I mean, there's just so many applications that, and I'm really excited as we learn about the 911 data, what are Durham folks calling 911 for, and being able to overlay that will also give us a really good idea about our needs and what capacity, what is required to meet the needs of our neighbors in crisis. So
I'm sorry, Marcia. I'm sorry. Before we move on, Manju had her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Super.
So sorry, a late comer to the Q&A. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to speak with us. I heard Jennifer note this question of how do we define that there's kind of a process for who can access the various services, and sometimes the barrier is in qualifying. And I wondered, how does someone at any one of these points get identified as someone with qualifying substance use or with qualifying mental illness? That was my first question. And then my second question is actually connected to what Ms. Owen just raised. The 911 data that we looked at appeared to only include the police, the DPD data, and we wondered how is it possible that we could include review of what the Sheriff's Department is up to in terms of those calls for service and how those are categorized.
Manju, am I saying your name correctly? So I think the identification usually happens at the agency level. So you know, I mean, if you have two different levels. Sorry, let me start over. I think you can have where someone identifies someone has something is not right. Someone seems in distress. Someone clearly needs some assistance. But then if you're looking for a diagnosis, then it needs to happen at the agency level. Or we have screening tools that just say this person needs further assessment. So, you know, because you don't, on one hand, you don't want everybody to diagnose everybody else, right? So you want the qualified professionals to do the actual diagnosing and the actual evaluation, and that takes time. So you have, when you look at those services in Intercept Zero, almost all of them have qualified professionals that can do that. Of course, not in the house, not normally not in the housing part, but you know, in emergency departments, or Duke just opened a behavioral health urgent care clinic. So you have a lot of professionals that can do the diagnosing. Law enforcement can only say, hey, this person might be better served by this agency, or needs to go here. So you have in all the intercepts, you have agencies that can do this diagnosing and the evaluation and the assessment, but it's just not available all the time and 24/7 in every agency, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I answered your question.
To some extent, I mean, the point of entry you named is exactly what I'm wondering about. Like, if someone's point of entry into the diagram that you shared with us is law enforcement, an encounter with law enforcement who is obviously not qualified to identify or screen or assess a substance use situation or a mental health struggle, then you're saying it is then the law enforcement officer's responsibility to kind of recognize that they're in the wrong wheelhouse and divert it? Or
no, it's not. No, it's, I think a lot of times there are some screening tools available, and like CIT, and there are some screening tools that for law enforcement in the field. There's screening tools where someone can just say, like when someone goes into the detention center and they go and they are screened by the medical staff, they have a tool, a 7-question screening tool for mental illness. And it's just, you know, but that means someone gets flagged. That doesn't mean they get diagnosed, right? It's just, there is a flag that says, we may need to take a closer look, but that's all it does. And I think something like this is available at various points of contact, whether it's in the field or when you first come into the detention center.
Thanks so much. And then the second piece of the question was just about the 911 data regarding the sheriff's department. Is there a way to access that full body of calls for service data? Are y'all looking at that too?
Are you asking, is that a question for me?
For the Criminal Justice Resource Center, yeah.
Oh, that is, well, the sheriff's office has a number of CIT trained officers, but the data that you are talking about, that where you were or I think the city was looking at the 911 calls, I don't know. I know the sheriff's office has a separate dispatch center from Durham Police Department, but that's not my wheelhouse. I really don't know that much beyond that. Sorry. I think Councilwoman Caballero knows something about that.
I just wanted to say the 911 call center information we have is just for DPD. So it's just on the city side, and all of that information that, and the 7 pilots that we plan on running are based off of that data.
So maybe that's a question that we can ask
Commissioner Burns.
At some point. Too
Yeah.
bad that she had to step off, but that's just a reason to follow up.
I do want to mention also that, and I'm kind of getting into the next step part of the agenda, but our next presentation will be from those who put together that 911 call center study, and much of what you're talking about is definitely relevant. That'll be in our next meeting. And so we'll get a chance to really, what we want to do is kind of take a look at what happens when somebody goes through the system. And then in the next meeting, understand that so much of the entry into those intercepts is that 911 call. So that's going to be our next presenter.
And I think it's a great, yeah, we do need to look at the sheriff's dispatch and integrate that. I think that's very important. And which leads us to any other questions? Are we ready to move on? I think that when you look at this map and you see all these services, all the, whether it's a community-based organization or a government agency, whether it's public or private, when people are in need, we need to know where those needs will be met. And so one of the things that we're gonna, as we begin to start thinking about building roundtables and getting into specifics, we wanna invite y'all, all the task force members and the public, to start identifying, helping us fill out what are those services that you know about or that you feel are most important. Who do you want to hear from in the community regarding alternatives to policing and the criminal legal system? So, and we encourage y'all from this meeting to use the email for the task force, which is communitysafety@durhamnc.gov, to share that information. There are so many good things happening, so many people who are responding. That last meeting from Durham Beyond Policing, it was full of organizations that are already responding to people's needs. And there's more. And I know that I don't know them all. And I don't think any one of us knows them all. But the more we know what is available, the farther we will get in making recommendations that work. So I just, we just really want to encourage everyone, invite everyone to let us know, who do you want to hear from? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to have populating those intercepts? Where do we take our friends when they need help? So there you go. Thank you, Jesse. So with that, any questions about that at all? Any comments? Xavier?
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
Okay, I can't see everybody on my screen here. So the next steps are that we need to start building these roundtables. Of course, we have those 5 areas that we talked about from the bylaws, but we can also identify additional roundtables. So we really do want, and we're going to send out an email. Either we will or Amber will. You're going to get an email, task force members, just asking you for your input on who you want to hear from our community, from our government agencies, from our community resources, community organizations, grassroots organizations. Who do you want to hear from? Either, and these will happen in several places. We want to make sure that we create a wide variety of opportunities to have different types of listening sessions. Again, a culture of listening across this community. It also helps us get to know our resource partners, our community resource partners, but other roundtables could include reentry or gun violence victims, survivors of abuse, addressing collective trauma, spiritual supporters. We have a lot. We want you to use your imagination and dream about who you really want to hear from, so that we're not missing anyone in this process. And so that's the next step, is really to, one, let us know who you want to hear from. And as we're doing that, we're going to come back to you and ask you, okay, well, which one of these roundtables would you like to be a part of? because we need to take this wonderful group and divide you up in so that we can really cover the community and do some intimate listening, some larger town halls, some 10 to 12 person roundtables. It could look many different ways. So we will definitely, Jesse, we're definitely going to split up like that in holes. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that in the chat. Just to say we should split up and hold more than 3 listening sessions. The 3 listening sessions was just our bylaw, what we were required to do. We've already gotten 2. We've already heard from 2 groups, and so we're gonna really spread this out and get as many voices on record as possible. And so I'll again, we're going to ask you, once we get that done, and once we realize, okay, here are the priorities based on what we're hearing from the task force and from the community, let's go ahead and get these going and ask you to identify which ones you want to serve on. Marcia, back to you.
Yeah, and I'd like to also add, Josie, thank you for that comment. When we think about listening sessions, I hope we have listening sessions the whole time we're meeting. As long as we exist, I feel we could have small listening sessions. I'd like to listen to the folks who are incarcerated in our jail. I'd like to listen to our folks that are living in transitional housing. I would like to hear the PTAs. We can have, I hope that we can really create a culture of listening where we have that time and those talents to listen to one another.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, because in my mind, when I was understanding roundtables or listening sessions, I was conceiving of that as separate from what we're doing in these public meetings. And for a second, I thought I heard you say, Xavier, that we had already had 2 of those, which made it sound like the first listening session was with Didi and Manju from 2 weeks ago, and then Gudrun was the second one. Is that the case?
That's how I see it, as the first of many. Yes, sir.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I think in my mind, I'm realizing we're holding listening session very openly, very broadly, that there's a lot of imagination for what those sessions for listening can look like. And that's fair. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Just making sure I'm clear.
I have a request of this group as you all think about the communities that you're listening to, because it's going to take more effort, is making sure that you're going into multilingual spaces, because those are often communities, and it's not just the Latinx or Latino community. We have a lot of refugees in our community, and they are very, very often not included at all. And that's a bigger lift. And so that will take some coordination, I think, on the city side, but there are, resources to help with that. So if folks get into that and get into the weeds, please reach out, and I will more than happily help connect folks to the language needs that may be needed.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Absolutely. Yes, I think that we are doing what we were required to do with the listening sessions, and then I feel like we can be as creative as we want to be, and as broad and deep and wide. Is there anything you'd like to add, Xavier? Before I think we're getting ready to close. Anything you'd like to add, anyone?
I would love to lift a thing that I saw Jatoia share in the chat box in case folks didn't get to see it, and maybe Jatoia, you would just want to share it aloud yourself, but we were in the midst of the conversation about the jail, and you had an observation.
Yes, thank you, Manju. Sometimes I'd be kind of hesitant, but I'm over here feeling a type of way because I'm just like, this is just not how it really is. And I know, like, when you get like pre-screening for jail, like when you first get there, it's not like, oh, this diagnosis, let us try to figure out what it is that you're going through. It's just like, do you have a problem? What meds do you need? Sometimes you don't even get the meds that you need. And then like say you don't get the meds that you need and then you become suicidal, then they get what's called like a green suit, and it's called the turtle suit. And they take your blanket, they take your mat, they take everything from you. And then they leave you in jail cell, like you don't get to come out. So then you're on like lockdown because now you don't have what you need. And it's just like ridiculous. So like I don't know like at what stage like people need to get the help that they need. But when she said like the law enforcement like no, they don't figure out. They just arrest you and then you get sent to jail and there's no like qualification for what it is that you exactly need. Like I was going through therapy. I don't have mental health issues, but I was going through therapy when I got to jail, and I was like, well, where's the therapy? Like now y'all putting me in jail, which is more traumatizing. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, so y'all have therapy in here? There aren't therapists. Like on here, it's like five clinicians. Like who is that? You know, like what are you giving people? Because they don't have what they need. And it's just simple as that. People get their meds. They do get their meds. They're saving them so then they can sell them for canteen because they don't have resources, don't have money to get put on their books. Like, and it's just, I don't understand. I'm just looking at this paper and I'm just like, this is not it.
And I feel like when we listen to people, we need to make sure, like, we already have access to feedback like this, but those folks aren't being listened to and they're being silenced. And we need to like uplift what has already been said. And as we create spaces for listening sessions, and no shade to what Gudrun and other folks are offering us, but like people who aren't director of this, that, third, are experts at what is really going on. And like, those are the people we need to listen to and we need to center. So that's where I'm coming from. When I think of listening sessions, that's what I'm thinking about. These feel more like helpful presentations, you know, to kind of help shape the like kind of to give us like a kind of map of like what's been going on. And so we have context. But yeah, so that's a part of why I was asking what was meant by listening sessions. And thank you, Jatoia, for lifting that up, and Manju for giving that space.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I agree with everything Toya said, but also while Gudrun was giving her presentation, I was asking her questions privately in the chat, and she never did answer any of the questions that I asked her. But if you look on the map that she gave us, if you see where it says risk assessments, I was asking her about why we can't have needs assessments as opposed to risk assessments, because we know that people have needs that are not met. There is no risk once you're incarcerated. The only risk is to yourself, like Jatoia said, to your mental health, to whether or not you get your diabetes medicine, whether you get your high blood pressure medicine. The only risk is what the violence that the system puts on people's bodies once they get incarcerated.
Right.
And so for her to never answer that, I mean, I thank you, Jesse, for asking, was this a listening session? Because I really didn't know that this was a listening session, because if it was a listening session, I would have thought that we would have had more information out to the people to ask for the public to be more present in to be able to hear that this is what we have, that we know that there's a big problem with pretrial from folks who have been formerly incarcerated, people who out here who, you know, bail people out and who help people once they leave that jail. That there is a big disconnect with pretrial and what Gudrun and them are doing and actually listening to the folks. Song had several meetings with Gudrun asking about doing participatory defense at the jail, or having public defenders at the magistrate office to advocate for folks before they get these bonds that they can't afford to pay, and none of those things have been addressed, and they clearly were not addressed in the mapping that they gave us. They still are not addressing the needs of the people. They're just putting more balance on the bodies of the people that are being incarcerated. So if we can, when we decide to do another listening session, if we can have the opportunity to do more outreach, to get more people from the community to be able to weigh in on what they feel needs to happen, because I can speak for folks who have been formerly incarcerated or directly impacted, but I'm just one voice. To allow those voices to be in the space and have them use the power that they have. If we're not willing to hand over our collective power to folks, then what are we doing?
Right. Yeah. And that's the future for us. I mean, this is when we're all together. We got to get some business done. We got to get organized, but that is exactly why this is such a great task force, because we have experienced people who know. So this is how, so we will, not just one listening session. We can have every kind of listening session you want, addressing all those it can be as specific as you choose, and we can reach into the community, just like you said. I mean, yeah, this is just the beginning. These meetings with all of us is not where the listening, the kind of listening session I think we're all dreaming about it, anticipating, desiring. This is a more formal group, and it's all the group, but we have a bylaw mandate that said we have to do 3 listening sessions, immediately. And so we are doing that. And I think it's so far so good. And I just, again, Toya, thank you, and Muffin. This is what we're depending on, is our relationships to Durham, to our neighbors, our friends, our families, who will bring forth our truth, our experience, and from that, a new way of doing things in Durham. So thanks. I'm just so grateful. And I think Gudrun probably didn't answer those because she was presenting. I'll make sure I'll capture that chat and speak with her, because I know she'll want to answer your questions. So with that.
That's actually a great thought in terms of next steps. I heard you say you want to move to next steps. Maybe, Muffin, if you'd be willing to share what your questions to her were, those could be questions from the task force to the Criminal Justice Resource Center. We'd like answers for why we're doing risk assessment instead of needs assessment when we know needs are going unmet. And thanks, Jatoia, for putting your experience out there. Like, it is not easy, and we know that there's listeners in this space. This is a public space, and I really don't want to underestimate the meaning and importance of being willing to share our truths here.
Amen. That's right. That is exactly right. We're over time. So, but we're going to get back together soon. And in the meantime, we can do lots of things. So let's keep let's keep our connections open and flowing. And the next meeting will be May 26th. And looking forward to that, seeing your beautiful faces again. And with that, I think it's time to close. What do you think, Xavier?
Sorry, Marcia, may we lift these 2 comments that Amber just shared into the chat? Sure. These were comments that popped up in the YouTube chat, which is another place where members of the public are interacting with our conversation.
Yeah.
From Jan Herman, I beg this task force to look hard at the harmful ways the parole and probation systems keep people sucked into their harms. A roundtable for those who've endured probation and parole after incarceration.
That's right. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. and keep it coming, y'all. I mean, this is exactly what we want.
Absolutely.
And it can't all be in the chat because we're only in this chat for this very small amount of time, right? So please, Durham, everybody who cares, who's touching this and wants to use that communitysafety@durhamnc.gov email, and we can all share that and we can answer it. For me, I don't know how y'all do this, chat and listen to people. You're fabulous. You have talents I do not possess. So again, an email gives me time to reflect, to read, and I know that it's not scrolling. So that's nice. Xavier, anything you'd like to say before we close?
Well, again, I'm just, as always, humbled to be around experts. To me, the word expert is rooted in experience. And so I've always want to lean into those who are experiencing whatever we're talking about. So I appreciate all the comments, and I'm humbled to be around you.
Me too. It really is an honor to be serving with y'all. No doubt about it. With that, we end our meetings with, if everyone would share a word on what you're taking from this time together that excites you. And I'll go first. I guess I want to say experience. And I will pass it to Manju.
Just really grateful for the generosity of everyone present. Thank you. Passing it to Tyler.
Tyler?
Or passing it to Isaac.
Feeling a little antsy to get going on this work. And I will pass it to Tonya.
I'm leaving with drive. And I'm passing to Tonya.
I am ready to get into the community, ready to get the work started. And I'm going to pass it to Samuel.
Thank you. I'm leaving with a lot more insight and definitely some excitement to help solve these issues. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Carroll.
Oh, I am excited. I'm excited. I can't remember the last time I was in a group where we didn't have to take someone through Human Rights and Dignity 101 at the door. I think that we are gonna align and hopefully do some really good work. And I'll pass it to Jesse.
My word is fortitude. Mental and emotional strength in facing difficulty and adversity. Fortitude. And I will pass it back to Mike, who called me pound cake because I make really good pound cakes, and he's had a slice.
Something we can all look forward to at the end. I would say motivated, and I'll pass it to Muffin.
I will say encouragement, because I'm leaving with encouragement that this task force will be what I imagine and envision it to be. So, and I will pass it to Amber.
Hey y'all, I think I'm leaving just with the sense of realness that I think Andrea and Jatoia shared with us tonight. Oh, I'm passing to Mike. Have you gone? Oh, you have gone. Okay, Shanise.
Yeah,
I'm leaving with inspiration and agency. Grateful for all the agency that was taken up today. And who has not gone? I will pass it to Javier.
Deliberation. That's what I'm leaving with. That we need to be very deliberate, because I know that will get us what we need. I will pass it to, I think, Alec, you haven't gone yet.
Yeah, I'm leaving with a sense of responsibility and I'll pass to Dr. AJ, soon to be doctor.
Thank you, Alec. I am leaving with gratitude. Again, honored and just so grateful to help you all in your purpose-driven mission and achieving that. I'll pass it to, has Samuel gone yet? Okay, I'm sorry. Marcia.
Well, I'll go again.
You kicked us off. You kicked us off. I'm sorry, Xavier.
I'm going to say belonging. I just can't help it. And I will pass it to Dwayne.
I leave with graciousness. Graciousness in knowing that we come with different perspectives to the table and we have lots of knowledge to share with each other, and that we're to be gracious with each other in how we share this knowledge and the actual substance of the knowledge that is shared.
Xavier?
And I just pass with I leave here just knowing that I'm blessed and that we are not here by accident. This is meant to happen with these people in this way. I'm just blessed to be a part of it. I believe that was, Tyler, are you with us? Did you want a chance? There we go.
I just got back off a call at 7:30. I know I missed something.
Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, just share a word with it. What are you taking from this time together that you're excited about?
I'm really excited to hear what Tonya had to say and how we can actually pinpoint what the issues are and start to work with those directly.
Great. What a wonderful, wonderful experience being with you all. Thank you. And we'll be getting things going, Isaac. I promise. And until we meet again, every blessing to you.
Thanks, y'all. Be safe.
Bye, everybody. Good to